What's up, guys? Welcome to episode 10 of Nervous Breakdowns with G, the podcast where I answer your questions about mental health issues. My name's Gino. I'm a nationally certified counselor with 10 years of experience and master's degrees and yada, yada, yada. And today we're going to try something a little different. Today I have a guest with me. Say hello.
Hi.
Okay, my guest is Alexis Orlacchio, right?
Yes.
Is that how you pronounce it?
Perfect.
Okay, excellent. And Alexis is a blogger.
Yeah. Blogger, freelance journalist, children's author in the works.
Okay, excellent. And so the reason I have Alexis is because I noticed that my first few episodes have been about kind of problems that people have. And the reason I started this podcast is because I wanted to do something that was a little more fun, a little more creative, and a little more positive. So I thought we'd have a discussion today about creativity, right? Mm-hmm. Because I noticed that one of the things, a trend that I've noticed with some of the more popular podcasts that I've listened to is that the podcasters talk about things that interest them. And so this is interesting me now, right?
Right.
But it's been very new for me to do creative things. My job is not very creative, and so I've been having, some growing pains, so to speak, as far as figuring out what my process is. So I thought we'd talk a little bit about that today.
Sure.
So tell me about yourself. Like, tell me how you became a writer.
It's an interesting story. When I was in high school, I was kind of like punk rock. I played the drums, and I was good at writing. So as I was going into college, my sister kind of came up with the idea. She's like, you play the drums, you like music, and you're also good at writing. Why don't you go to school to study journalism and be a music journalist? So that's kind of, she kind of figured it out for me. So back when I was 17, 18, I thought, music journalism, I can do this. So that's what I declared when I came into college.
So that was your major, music journalism specifically?
No, I was contemplating going to Five Towns College in New York for music journalism, and then I figured if I just get a basic journalism degree, if I one day don't want to do music, I didn't study just that. So I majored in communication with a concentration in journalism and public relations, and I picked up a minor in writing. And I don't actually want to be a music journalist anymore, although I don't knock it. I'm just a different person. But I do enjoy writing, and I kind of, when I was younger, my father kind of joked, he's like, you never know. He's like, you might be a children's book author, because when I was little, I used to grab construction paper, fold it, staple it, and write stories and draw pictures. And it was always kind of something I did when I was little, but I never really thought, I'm kind of good at this. I might want to do this when I'm older. And I kind of laughed at it when my father said something about it. But now here I am trying to write a children's book and doing all these things. So,
well, that's really cool. So the progression seems like it's been a pretty organic one. I mean, it's something where you've kind of been along for the ride.
Yes.
All right, that's awesome. And so you are now working. And the reason I had you here is because I read your what was that, an article, a blog post about,
right.
And the title was The Non-Guide.
The Anti-Guide to Living Your 20s.
Okay. It was really interesting because I think that guide extends past your 20s, right?
Exactly.
All right. So, and where would somebody find that article if they wanted to read it?
cuethesunx3.wordpress.com.
Okay. Okay. So I'm going to tweet that out when we're done with this so that people can have it. But yeah, it's a great article. So tell us a little bit about it. So if somebody's going to read it, what would they read?
It's kind of a reaction. I don't know. People may have seen these kinds of viral articles on their Facebook page. They're from great websites. I don't knock the websites at all, but it's a lot of kids in college or fresh out of college who are writing articles. And I get the meaning behind it, and I totally support it. I love anything positive. I'm like, yeah, you're only young once, so, take all these chances and do all these things. But they kind of write listed articles on how I should live my 20s. And, some of the things that they list are just kind of like to be reckless and, that's great. Spend a night out drinking with your friends or whatnot. But there's other things I want to do in my 20s, and it extends for your whole life. And they kind of present the information in a way that, I am so philosophical and what I know is great and right, and you should take my advice because of this. And I'm kind of saying I don't have a degree to tell anyone, I'm not a life coach. I don't know how people should live their life. I don't know I don't know what works for them. I know what works for me. And I kind of just, your 20s are not just a decade for you to be reckless and spend money you don't have, but find out, what makes you tick, what music you like, and, just experience everything that you can possibly can in your 20s. So it's kind of a rebuttal to articles telling me what I should do with my
great.
life.
I mean, it was really a great article. It was refreshing to read, and I actually, when I shared it on my own page, I got a lot of interesting responses on it too. But yeah, I'm with you. I work in the mental health field, and many times I have people that come in and they look to me as a counselor for, what should I do in this situation? And the truth is, I don't know. I mean, I don't know what the right choice for a person in a given situation is. I make mistakes all the time.
Right.
They didn't teach me that in graduate school, what to do in every situation. But one of the things that I do is I encourage my clients to experiment, right? I talk about that on this podcast all the time, just being a scientist in your own life. Try something, right?
Right.
And if it doesn't work out, now you don't want to do that again in the future. And if it does work out, then do more of it. But I think that people attach self-worth to their failures.
Right.
You know what I mean?
I can definitely see that, which, but then again, they're, I think, critical for success.
Absolutely, right? You can't do well unless you fail. I listened to this podcast with the Joe Rogan podcast. He talks about fighters all the time. And one of his big themes is that the fighters that have done the best after a loss. So they have to get their ass kicked, and then they come back and they work harder. Right? So, very interesting. So, creativity. I have like a mentor of sorts. It's a buddy of mine who is a graphic designer, and he is awesome about kind of listening to all my podcasts and giving me good feedback. And one of the things that I've been kind of ambivalent about is there are times when I don't have a deadline. This is my thing. I put it out when I feel like it,
right.
But I kind of gave myself a deadline of putting out a show a week.
Right.
And there have been times when, like, it's the last day of the week and I need to put out the show. But, I'm running late at work, or I don't feel so hot, or I don't love the topic that I've picked for the week. And I've had discussions with this guy about, maybe I'll just put it off for a day. And he's like, no, you have to stay on your schedule. You have to put it out. That's how you get better. What do you think? I mean, do you think that it's about waiting for the time to be right to put out a good product, or just having to keep turning them out?
That's a great question. I don't know if the time is ever actually perfect. I have had professors that tell me, you can revise in reference to writing, you can revise your work until you're dead. But, can you do it too much? Can you not do it enough? And there's different takes on that. Different professors that I've had is you can revise, you can never revise enough, or you can revise your work only so much and then it starts to fall apart and lose what you were trying to do. I used to edit for Monmouth University's newspaper, and obviously that was a deadline, but there were some times when I was sitting down or editing where I just had to get up, take a walk around, come back, sit down. I think breaks can be good. I think they could, I guess it depends on the person whether or not they help or hurt you. If you're the kind of self-motivated person that is like, okay, I just need to take a day, breathe, and you're going to come back to it, or 5 years goes by. I mean, as long as you get back to it, I guess.
Yeah, I like I said, I can see that side of it. This my friend, he takes the philosophy that your creativity is like a muscle. You kind of have to keep working it out. And sometimes when you force yourself to produce something, he was like, you don't know how many times in graphic design, like you kind of just sit down and smash something out because it has to be done, and it comes out great. Like it turns out to be your best thing.
Right.
So when do you decide when the editing is done? How do you know when you're ready?
Actually, the blog post that we just talked about, I didn't really think it was done per se. I sat down on my day off and I typed it, but there were so many other elements that I could have brought into it. There are so many different ways I could have gone with it. I didn't want to end it the way that I ended it, but I put it up anyway because I think, especially, anyone that, does anything, I guess, makes music or writes or anything, you just kind of get this feeling where you're like, I have to do this right now. And that was that blog post. I sat down, I was like, there's all these feelings that I have. If I don't write them down now, I'm not going to get them out. And that's what I did. My godfather teaches poetry at Georgian Court, and he, every time I see him, says, never stop writing, never stop writing. Every creative writing professor that I've had, it was, we had a journal and we had to write in it at least 20 minutes, half hour a day. So I think I agree with your friend who, it's almost, if you don't use it, you lose it, but not everything that you do has to be perfect and great and
Right.
whatever. There's going to be, you know, some things you publish that are better than others, and, you know, it's all personal opinion too. So I agree with smart man, friend.
Yeah, he's a good dude. But so I use this. What you're looking at on my screen, the recording software is called Audacity. It's this free thing that you can download, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what happens is every time you stop recording and then start up again, it creates like a new track.
Okay.
So there have been some episodes where there was such a struggle for me. They ended up having like 12 or 15 different stops and starts.
Mm-hmm.
You can't hear it in the recording. I mean, because I re-edit it.
Right.
And so when I published them, when I put them online, I thought they were going to be crap. I thought they were going to be so shitty, but just because of the feeling that I had making it.
Mm-hmm.
And I've actually had some of the best response to those.
Right.
And conversely, the ones that I felt the most fluid doing, where I sat down and banged them out in one session, like the least viewed ones.
Right.
And so I don't know how to judge that. Like, I don't know, when it comes to being creative, do I trust my own judgment?
Right.
Which is good and bad, or do I go by the views, right? So, but I think a lot of the views are driven by the title too. I mean, it could have nothing to do with how good the actual recording is.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
Or just a topic that is relevant to majority.
Yeah, exactly. More people are interested in it. But I guess the thing that I have to try to remember is that I do this for me. So if nobody listened to it, then again, it's always fun to see the views numbers go up. I mean, I know you made the post when you hit 100 on your on your blog post, and you were pretty excited. It's fun, but by the same token, what are we really doing this for, right?
Exactly.
So your intention is to make a living writing.
That would be ideal. If I could write what I wanted to write and people paid me for it, that would be awesome.
Yeah.
I mean, it's possible. Definitely possible, but it's just gotta work to get there.
How do you feel about just writing for money? Like, what if it's not necessarily what you want to write?
I would definitely do it, and I think especially coming out of college, I'm going to have to do some jobs that necessarily aren't my favorite and aren't the best and not what I wanted. But I mean, I guess as long as it's writing, I guess I'm a fan of it, and if I can do that. I can always do what I want to do on the side, even if I don't get paid for it. I can always write what I want, even if I don't get paid. Writing to write, I think it'd be a great stepping stone for what I want to do.
Yeah.
And anything that gets me more experience and more clips, I'm a fan. I'm for it.
And, you figure as you improve as a writer, doing kind of the, jobber type stuff, it'll give you some money in your pocket, and then you can do the other stuff on the side, right? Mm-hmm. So how do you pick your topics?
My blog topics?
Yeah, your blog, whatever you want to write about. Or, tell me about do you have any ideas for children's books, and how did you arrive at those? Children's
books, actually, I am in the middle of writing. I want a trilogy, and I'm going to, the main characters are going to be each of my nephews.
Okay.
So I kind of, when I'm babysitting or whatever, all of my inspiration basically comes from the kids. I think as an adult, it's kind of hard to think as a 5-year-old. So when you're around them, just things they say and, how they look at the world, I just take notes and try and see the world through their eyes and whatnot. So my first book I am working on is Mason Beach. It's about my nephew Mason at the beach. My brother, who lives in Massachusetts, comes down every summer and gets a shore house, and we all, those are my fondest memories of my nephew Mason, is spending days at the beach with him. So it's kind of building off that.
So definitely using your life experience, but
yes.
It sounds intensely personal. Is that a necessary part of being creative? Is that it has to be very personal?
I don't think so. I think it definitely helps. I was always taught by professors that successful authors use, their characters in their books are based off of people that they know in real life or combinations of people. And I definitely think that helps give it more authenticity, and you can develop a character better if you have an example in your life. But I've written in my creative writing classes stuff that has nothing to do with me or anyone that I know, and they've been received well, the stories that I've written. So I think it helps, but I don't think it has to be super personal. My blog posts especially, well, it's a personal blog, so I guess those are really personal. They're about, I have a lot on travel, which I've actually read studies and stuff that being abroad increases creativity, which works for me. So that's a lot of, I got a lot out of study abroad. I wrote a lot about my study abroad experiences and wanting to go back, and I will be there again in July. So
hopefully. You mentioned it. Congratulations. That sounds like it's going to be a lot of fun. Yeah, I enjoy that too. I like to travel, and there's something that's indescribable. Well, maybe you could, being a writer, but there's when you are, for example, in a place that's very old, right? I've been to Europe many times, and you go to Europe, and there are several places that have been around since the time of Christ. I mean,
Right.
2,000 years ago. I mean, people lived there and walked in the same cobblestones. And once in a while, when I was in Florence, for example, you walk through and you're like, wow, this crap is older than America. You know what I mean? There's so much history here that it almost would become overwhelming. The feeling of just I don't know, permanence.
Right.
The word I can't put a word on it, but yeah. So I think that's an important part of it, having those experiences.
Definitely.
To being able to create stuff. So that's for you a big inspiration is traveling around.
Yes.
And where have you been?
I studied abroad alone. I was in Florence, was my home base. I went to Venice. We did a weekend in Assisi. I actually took a bus and spent a weekend in Interlaken, Switzerland. I went to a bunch of places in Italy, and of course I'm blanking out on them now. We had a layover in Germany, which I will later explore this summer. We did the Amalfi Coast. I went to Pisa, Elba Island, which was beautiful and not really too much of a tourist spot, Elba Island, I don't think. It was a tour through the school, and I'm glad that I went there. As you said, Florence, which holds dear to my heart.
Yeah. By the way, ladies and gentlemen, if you're listening, if you can travel to one place in Italy, go to Florence. It's the best by far. You're not going to get a tan there, but you're going to see some really cool stuff.
Yes. It was, they prepped us before we went abroad about the culture shock, but it was so weird because I didn't feel one. I kind of just went into it, and I felt the reverse culture shock coming home. I was driving on Route 35, and I was like, I don't feel, this place feels so foreign to me. I don't feel like I'm home. It was nuts. But just walking around Florence, and I cried in the Sistine Chapel. It was just so overwhelming and so beautiful. But it's just amazing the experience. What I continue to hope to write about. I mean, being a travel writer would be pretty cool. But I just hope the trip in July will give me more blog posts and stuff to write.
Have you tried to visit other cultures? I mean, you're Italian, right? So the culture might be not that different from yours. How about exposing yourself to different cultures? I'm
going this summer. I'm going to Spain.
Okay.
I'm going to spend some time in Spain, Germany, and Switzerland. I'm going back to Italy, but those are the three that are a little different for me that
definitely
I will explore.
Yeah, I want to visit places even more, non-European for me personally, because I want to experience that. From a mental health standpoint, different cultures have different mental health problems, right?
Right.
Like in the United States, for example, I'm going to botch these statistics because I don't have them in front of me. But sociopathy, right, is the illness that it's a character flaw that makes you not feel for other people. Okay, and in the United States, it's something like 4% or 5% of people have traits of it. They're not serial killers necessarily, but in certain groups, it's even higher. Like in executives, like corporate executives, it's 50 or 40%. There's some evidence to suggest that in order to succeed in business, you kind of have to not care about other people, right? But when you go to places like Asia, because they're much more community based, the incidence of that is less than 1%.
Yeah.
All right. So I find myself curious because I'm looking at it from that standpoint. What is it about those cultures that can shape somebody's personality that profoundly? I mean, we're talking about just different illnesses from one place to another. So yeah, I mean, I think that kind of ties into why I started this.
Right.
I find my interests come from like peeling back layers on stuff. You know, like I like to learn about a new concept that explains a behavior that's common, and I like to explore that, and I like to try to communicate that to people also. You know, so I think that I need to, for my own creative process, focus more on that aspect of it. But then I worry that it gets boring. You know, for me, what might be I'm a nerd, so for me, what might be exciting might not be exciting for somebody else.
Right.
You know, so yeah. I mean, what are your thoughts about just the role of like your own interests in creating things? I mean, it's pretty central, right?
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, if you don't have your heart into something, what is going to make someone else passionate about it, or want to pick it up and read it, or look at it, or be interested in it as well? You know, I think you have to put your heart into what you're doing.
Without a doubt.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Experience too. Did you see the movie Adult World?
No,
Okay.
I'm the worst movie watcher ever.
I think you would actually really like it. It's an indie film. I think
Okay.
it's like you can get it on demand now, but it's still in theaters. One of those things.
Okay.
And the stars are kind of not well-known people, but John Cusack is in it. He's
Okay.
like anyway, the plot of the movie is that it's a girl who's graduating college. She wants to be a poet, and she writes these like awful hacky poems, and she's like trying to, but in her mind, because she won like her college award and she got good grades and she had a 3.9 GPA, she's a great poet. And nobody's picking up her stuff. Like she's submitting to like the New Yorker to get published, and they're rejecting her. And the whole movie is about how she simply can't write well because she doesn't know anything.
Right. Right.
There's problems in the movie. It's not at the end of the movie. I get aggravated, but I think that the central message is sound, right?
Right.
So experiences. Do you ever, aside from traveling, do you ever expose yourself to things that you might not normally because you want to have that experience?
Well, I guess the most recent, I tried a new food the other day.
Okay.
It's kind of, my friend Melissa took me to an Indian restaurant and said she doesn't really have the means to travel. And, I mean, this ties back to travel, but
yeah.
Whoops, sorry.
Yeah, no.
She said her way of traveling, because she doesn't have the money, is through eating. She experiences different cultures, and she gets to read and whatnot. I'd like to try and expose myself to more, just because that I'm not familiar with. I think I'm very open to learning, and I want to learn a lot about whatever I can. I don't necessarily have to do that through traveling, although it's my favorite way. But yeah, I mean, I'd like to just kind of absorb anything I can, try anything I can, expose myself to new, weird, different stuff that I might not know that I like.
Do you think that you can learn enough vicariously to be a good writer about it, as opposed to, or do you think experiencing it is a?
That's a great question. I guess it depends on how skilled of a writer you are. If you are kind of like super empathetic, and while you're reading can transport yourself into, I guess you can learn from other writers. I mean, I guess it's kind of like a good musicians borrow, great musicians steal kind of thing. I guess if you kind of do that, and you can, I guess, try and mimic a well-known author or something. I guess you can try and mimic them as best you can, but I don't know if it would have the same effect as when people read it.
Yeah, and plus, I mean, if you're trying to translate something that's really visceral, right? Something that's really personal on paper to somebody who hasn't experienced it. If you haven't experienced it yourself, how do you know that you're doing it accurately?
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, I have that, again, in counseling. I sit down and I'm counseling people who are really suffering, right? And in their suffering, excuse me. Sorry about that, guys. But in their suffering, they ask me sometimes, "Have you experienced this?" And I have to. I mean, I'm honest. I'm myself with my counseling. No, I haven't. I'm not depressed. And so they say, "Well, how can you know what I can do about it?" Now, it's in fairness, it's not an exact comparison, right? Because you wouldn't have to have cancer to be a good doctor that treats cancer, right? You wouldn't have to have the illness to know how to treat it. And in fact, in mental health treatment, I can make a pretty decent argument that it's pretty important for me not to be sick in order to treat you.
Yeah.
Okay. But I ask myself that sometimes too. So the way I handle it is I take when I've had even an inkling of the feeling.
Right.
You know, if I take the time, you know, like when I've had a loss or a tragedy or a failure, and I try to extrapolate from there, you know. But yeah, I think I personally think experiencing something is critical.
Right.
And I, you know, kind of threw myself into this thing with both feet. You know, it was terrifying to post something online of me talk. I mean, I hear myself. Like I mentioned this the last time. I hear my accent. I'm like, I sound like an idiot, right? But yeah, it's tough to know where to fall on it.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. I know another thing that I thought of while we were talking is you mentioned how your job doesn't really let you be creative. I just in general, like a lot of adult jobs, you know, it's rules, regulations. You don't really have, you know, express creativity. I read a bunch of statistics, which sorry, I don't have the sources. That it's like elderly people who do creative projects age slower, and all these like weird things about creativity and how it's more embraced in Eastern cultures than Western cultures, and
absolutely,
it's just kind of crazy to see, you know, going back to studying how cultures shape people and what kind of problems they have. You know, creativity kind of, they did studies on that too, and how that ties into everything.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I actually want to. I don't even think it's an East-West thing. I think it's an American thing. I mean, we have this work, like this attitude where you have to constantly be productive, and you don't see that in Europe. I mean, and you know, I haven't been to Asia, but I see, you know, the stereotypical, like the park early in the morning with all the elderly people doing the Tai Chi, and they seem to have a real respect and understanding that you have to take care of yourself. The same thing with my family in Europe, although, you know, in fairness to you guys, Italian people don't really work very hard, man. They barely work. You know, I have cousins that are in their 40s that I don't think they have real jobs. I don't know how they support themselves, but they're never working, okay? Right. But that aside, many Europeans work hard, but they also, you know, will say, "Hey, look, it's lunchtime. We're gonna split for an hour. We're gonna take a walk through the city, grab a coffee, take care of ourselves, right? Have a little biscotti, and we'll come back to work in a couple of hours, and the work will still be here,
right?
So, I mean, I don't know if it's the greatest attitude for making money, but it's a great attitude for staying healthy, for sure.
Exactly. I had one of the chefs at the restaurant where I work the other day. We were just talking about when he has vacation time and stuff like that. And I was asked, like, you know, oh, did you work yesterday, this and that? And he said, he looked at me and said, there's no life in America. Said, because all everyone does is work. And, you know, I know so many people balancing 2-3 jobs and they don't have a life. They're just making ends meet. Yeah.
It's really a rat race.
Yeah.
I think that's going to change.
I hope so.
I hope so too. It's going to be generational. I mean, I think that your generation more so than mine. Like mine, your generation has to do it by force, right? Because you guys graduated in times when jobs were scarce, you know? So you have to be a little more creative in terms of keeping yourself busy, in terms of not stagnating, right? Stagnating is something that's terrifying to me. Just sitting there. I have friends that are like that. They graduated high school and it was just, you know, for whatever reason, a delay, and now it's, you know, I'm 35. I graduated high school when it's almost 20 years later.
Yeah.
And they are right where I left them.
Yeah.
You know, I feel bad. I don't think it's because of character flaws necessarily. I don't think it's because they're soft or lazy or bad people. But I think that sometimes time gets away from you, you know?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. So what's next? What's next for you?
What's next for me?
Yeah.
I am currently a waitress. But I want to, when I come home from Europe, it's kind of hard, I feel like, to kind of apply for a job when I'm going to be gone for a month in the summer. I feel like that's a make or break kind of thing. So I'm trying to find temporary jobs right now to kind of fill my resume until I get back. I'm actually helping a friend who I know. He wrote a book, and he had me edit his query letter, so I helped him reformat that, and he's sending it out. And I edited the first chunk of his book that he's sending to editors because he wanted a clean copy, which is kind of awesome that he asked me to do that for him. And
yeah, I mean that's like it's essentially exactly what you want to do.
Perfect. Yeah. So when I come home from my trip, I'm hoping to apply to some publishing houses, and I didn't really think of editing as a way to go for me, but I mean, it's still in my field and I like to do it, so I would definitely want to do that. And I kind of want to go back to grad school, but I don't know what exactly I want to study, so until I blow all that money, I want to make sure. I mean, I have time. I'm only 22, and I think a lot of people do, they get held back by their age and their number, and they think that because, they're 40, they can't change careers or whatnot. And I just, it's really hard to get caught up in that. You pick this, you have to do it for the rest of your life. But, if I want to take up hula hooping when I'm 44, I hope that I will, So that's what I have on for plans right now. But, life can kind of come in and rearrange everything.
What do you think about let me give you the background for this question. So, I know a lot of people who are all about you got to put in your time, right? Mm-hmm. So if you want to learn something, specifically, you have to go and maybe you can't get a job getting paid doing it, but maybe it's really valuable to go volunteer. Mm-hmm. So if you want to learn how to be a mechanic, for example, go sweep the shop for an hour a day. And before you know it, if you've been there like a month or 2 months, somebody will show you how to like change oil or something.
Yes.
So what about that? What do you think about that kind of experience?
I definitely think it's a foot in the door. You have to start from somewhere. I think the higher ups, when they start from the bottom, are better managers and bosses when they've come from the bottom. There is a show, it's escaping the name. It's basically about they put in these like undercover people to go work in like a McDonald's or Burger King. Is it Undercover Bosses? Yes. Yeah. It is the best show ever, and there's CEOs that don't know how to work the fryer. And I'm like, you don't just get plopped at the top. That I don't think that's how things should be. You have to, work to where you are. And if, I have a friend who wants to do tattooing, and right now he's sweeping the shop and cleaning it up and doesn't get paid. He's a talented artist, super, super talented. He used to tattoo in, I think, Staten Island, but now he's in New Jersey and he's working his way back up. You have to do what you want to do. If you're passionate about it, you get up every day, put in the hard work. Someone's going to recognize it, and you will be rewarded.
Yeah,
I think.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I notice a tendency that human beings have to look at a finished product and not to appreciate the work that goes into getting it there. So, for example, as a new podcaster, I may listen to somebody who's got 500 episodes in the can, and I may say, that sounds really great. Look at all these downloads, and now that I'm in episode 10, I have like tens of downloads,
right.
not hundreds of thousands, and I'd be like, this is bullshit. I'm not doing it anymore. Where I think that we have a tendency not to appreciate that didn't happen overnight for that person,
right?
And that sometimes the success is the end product and not the beginning,
right?
As an editor, did you ever come across something that was just so jacked up you couldn't even mess with it?
Yeah.
What do you do in that situation?
It was really rough because there was a student in particular who the entire kind of editing staff felt we were writing their articles for them, but their name was on it, and they got to put it in, they get to put it in their portfolio, but they didn't put the research in, facts weren't backed up, and we kind of, you can only push a person so far, and we had space to fill, so we would pick up the slack for them. And it's really hard to kind of watch that happen. And we, I'm just a big believer in, you kind of get what's coming to you. What you put in is what you get out. And if you cheat your way to the top, you might not stay there or something like that. So I'm a big hard work ethic believer.
In journalism, is there like an ethical code?
In
general, just for conduct, for your behavior?
Definitely.
I know plagiarism is probably a huge one, but so what would you like? How do you make a decision about when you're editing to help a person and when you're actually right? Like, where's the line, so to speak?
I I mean, we definitely would contact the person, we always, any problems we ever had with our writers, we would have them come in and sit down with the editor, and we'd go over, you did great with this, and, this, not so much, but the one specific person we were talking about, we had drilled, over, 100 times, and they just, I think they just kind of did it because they had to pass, like, a class or something. Mm-hmm. Not that college is, like, not a big deal, and but it wasn't the Wall Street Journal or something like that. It was our school paper, so I mean it was a team effort, but I don't think that would fly in a actual newsroom.
Yeah, no, I mean we're speaking about interests, right? Mm-hmm. I've become more interested lately in like philosophy and ethics, right? Mm-hmm. In terms of how do we know what's right and what's wrong, and can something be universally right and wrong, right?
Right.
And so when I look at questions like that, I often wonder, how do you make the decision?
I had a professor who definitely kind of taught lessons that you can't get out of a textbook, and a lot of it dealt with ethical codes and whatnot. And he was telling us basically, a problem they were faced with and how they got around it, and it would be just using journalism like tactics. Right. To you can, if there's a situation you want to write about but you don't want to give the person away, you want to protect their identity, you can kind of, they picked a specific situation that happened on campus, and there was a student involved, but the way that they wrote it, they made it sound like she was like an older woman from New York. They kind of, in the way that you write and don't really identify people, the person reading the article, you would only really know it was you if it was actually right. You. So it's if there's a story that, because journalism is for the good of the people, you are the voice of the people, you're the fourth estate, you're supposed to look out, you're the watchdog for everyone else. So if there's a topic or something that you think the public should know, but it's going to hurt someone else, there's ways that you can mask identity and mask so people don't get hurt. And just to be honest, he always would say, truth is our goal, candor is our defense.
Right.
So.
Right. Yeah, I became very interested in journalism during the last political season, mm-hmm. because there was a lot of talk among political people about false equivalence. Mm-hmm. In other words, they present, in an attempt to be fair, they present both sides with equal weight. Mm-hmm. But the argument was, if both sides don't have equal weight, then, being biased is being fair. In right. other words, if I'm just going to use a scientific example. Mm-hmm. So global warming, right? Mm-hmm. The vast majority of people that study global warming, that study, the climate, mm-hmm. say that, look, global warming is a thing. It's man-made. It's among scientists, it's kind of not under debate.
Right.
And then what would happen is the people who are against it would trot out, the one guy that they can find mm-hmm. that disputes it, and who's not even really a climate scientist. And so, well, if a journalist presents it and says, look, global warming is a thing, mm-hmm. it's not bullshit. The opposite side says, you're biased journalism, right? You're not right. presenting both sides.
Right.
So where do you fall on that? I mean, is the journalist's job to present both sides, or to present the more accurate side?
I would say both sides. And I was always taught, you give as much information on both sides as you can. You let the reader decide what they believe. With something with global warming, I can hear my professor in my head saying a journalist isn't a scientist. Mm-hmm. So they can't tell you, scientific. They can find a scientist that they agree with to tell you the facts. But the journalists themselves cannot say, hey, global warming is a thing. This, right. Opinion should not be in it at all. And
so does the journalist have a responsibility then to say, this guy thinks that global warming is not real, but he's in the minority?
Yes and no. Not in those words, but you can definitely say, the evidence has been stacked, against, the rate. You can point out the ratio of right. the studies that go along with it and the studies that don't. But I think, give everyone everything, and they make their own decisions.
I don't know where to fall on that myself either, because I agree with you. You know, if you're not in our example, if you're not a climate scientist, you can't speak to, you know, who's right and who's wrong. Right? But then there's a part of me that says, then if I come out with something absurd, should I be equally valuable? You know, like you're wearing, what color is it? Black? You have a black jacket on. If I say you're wearing, you know, I think you have a white jacket on. So as a reporter, do you have to say that, you know, is your job to say that the jacket is black, or is it your job to say that it could be white or black?
It's the job to be as accurate as possible.
Okay.
As accurate and as close to the truth as possible.
So in your case,
black.
All right. Okay, so good stuff. We got a little bit kind of in the weeds off of creativity,
Whoops.
but yeah, okay. So in general, just do it, right? Just keep being creative. Practice.
Anything that inspires you, music, being outside, anything that inspires you, people, just find it, use it, right.
Excellent. Do you have anything? Do you have a Twitter handle that you want to plug, or?
I don't really use Twitter. I'm sorry.
Oh, you're missing out. Twitter's big. It's a good one. Okay. Well, what about? Do you want to say your blog site again?
Sure. cuethesunx3.wordpress.com.
Okay. And like I said, I'll tweet that out as well.
Perfect.
So everybody, thank you so much for listening. Thank you, Alexis, for joining me. This has been the next evolution, the next iteration of my podcast is having some interviews involved. And please, guys, follow me at Twitter. I'm at Breakdowns with G. I have a Tumblr page as well, breakdownswithg.tumblr.com. You can email me questions at breakdownswithg@gmail.com. And on a side note, I learned that if you're downloading this thing off of iTunes or Stitcher, or you're watching it on YouTube, like comment on it, because apparently that's like a good thing to do, to comment on it. So comment, give me a thumbs up or Yahoo or whatever the positive sign is if you like it. If you don't like it, don't comment. I just want I want all feedback. So please, make a note if you're downloading this. And again, I depend on your questions. So if you have any questions, please lay them on me. So thanks a lot, guys.